Everyone, welcome back to Teaching Math. In this short video, I'm going to show you step by step how to understand and work with square roots, positive and negative roots, solve equations using square roots, work with fractional and decimal roots, and evaluate expressions that include square roots. So stick around. By the end of this video, you will be confident solving more complex square root problems. Let's dive in. Let's start with what a square root actually means. A square root is a number that when multiplied by itself gives you original number. For example, we have 3 squared, which means 3 times 3 equals 9. If we want to undo this, we put the 9 under a radical sign. So see, this sign over here means a radical, which will be square root of 9 equals 3. You can basically find a square root of whole numbers up until 20 with ease if you know your multiplication table. For example, if I ask you what is a square root of 64, you know, well, 8 times 8 equals 64. Then there will be 8. What is the square root of 49? So if you know that 7 times 7 equals 49, then you will see that the square root of 49 is 7. This has all have to do with multiplication. However, another way to think about the square root is imagining that you have a square with an area of 36 square inches. If you were to ask to find the side length, you would think about it. What number multiplied by itself gives you 36? Well, that number is 6 because 6 squared equals 36, or another way we can say that 6 times 6 equals 36. And if we have to reverse it, undo what was done, that means the square root of 36 equals 6. So, in other words, a square root tells you the side length of a square when you already know its area. That's why we call it a square root. It's literally connected to the geometry of a square. So anytime you need to find the square root of a number, think of it as finding the side length of a square with that area. That picture makes it much easier to understand what really is happening. Think of square root as the opposite of squaring. Squaring makes the number bigger. Square rooting brings it back down to the original number. Here's something that often confuses students. Every square has negative and positive roots. Well, what does that mean? Let's think of it this way. If I multiply 3 squared, which is positive, or 3 times 3 equals 9, and if I say negative 3 squared, or negative 3 times negative 3, the answer will be 9. As you can see, negative 3 times 3 and 3 times 3 both will equal 9. But here's the key difference. When you see the radical symbol like here, square root of 9, it means only the positive or the principal square root is necessary. So square root of 9 will be 3. And similarly, square root of 9, which has a negative sign, the front of the radical sign will be negative 3 because the negative sign was at the front. Now the key difference is when you're solving the equation. For instance, if you have x squared equals 9, then we're going to square root each number and find that x will equal either negative 3 or positive 3, or can even write it like plus and minus 3. That's when both roots are necessary. Let's talk about square root of 0 and negative numbers. 0 is easy. Square root of 0 is 0. There's only one root. But for negative numbers, there's no real square root because no real number squared gives a negative result. As we saw before, negative 3 times negative 3 will equal 9, and 3 times 3 will equal 9. So there's no way to square a real number and get a negative. So square root of negative 9 is not a real number. It belongs to imaginary number systems, which you will study in algebra. Now let's solve simple equations that involve square roots. The steps are always the same. Take the square root of both sides, write plus and minus for both positive and negative answers. So let's go ahead and get started. First question, x squared equals 25. What is x? Well, we have to think about what number multiplied by itself will equal 25. This is where you have to know your multiplication table. In fact, when you really know what is 1 times 1, what is 1 times 1 or 1 squared, what is 2 times 2 or 2 squared, all of this up until 20 is a good idea to know to find your square roots. So what number multiplied by itself will equal 25? It will be 5. And don't forget, we don't know if it was negative or positive. So we're going to write plus or minus or negative 5 or 5. Number 2, x squared equals 49. What number multiplied by itself equals 49? Plus and minus 7. X squared equals 81 plus or minus 9. So let's move on to more intermediate equations when we have to square root an entire group. So our first step will be square root both sides. Let's write our first equation. X minus 2 squared, as you can see that entire is squared, equals 16. Let's go ahead and square root both sides. Find the square root of both sides. And x minus 2 equals 4. Don't forget, it's plus or minus 4. Now, let's go ahead and move on to our second step. Step 2, split. Well, what does this mean? Now we're going to have two equations, right? So one of them will be x minus 2 equals 4. And then the other will be x minus 2 equals negative 4. And now we solve. So add 2 to both sides. And here we have x equals 6. Now add 2 to both sides. And here we have x equals negative 2. Okay, let's tackle our second equation. 2x squared equals 100. What do? We square root both sides. This will give us 2x equals plus or minus 10 because square root of 100 equals 10. Now we're going to split. So one side we're going to write 2x equals negative 10, and the other side we're going to write 2x equals 10. Now we solve. We're going to divide both sides by 2. X will equal negative 5. And again, on the other side, we're going to divide both sides by 2. And then x will equal 5. Final answer, x equals plus or minus 5. As you can see here, negative and positive 5. Well, let's take a look at how do we know if that equation works, because it's really out to have the answers 6 or negative 2. Let's go ahead and try. Check both answers here. So first we're going to say that 6 minus 2, we're going to use 6 in here, equals, let's go ahead and see what it equals. Well, 6 minus 2 equals 4. Then we write squared. Okay, so 4 squared equals 16. So our first equation, when x is 6, checks out. It's correct. Now let's go ahead and find out if x is -2, will the equation work? Well, -2 minus 2 will be -4, and -4 squared will equal 16. So our second one checks out as well. Okay, what if we're trying to find a square root of a fraction or a decimal? Let's start with fraction. So our first step will be, if we're finding the square root of 9/16, we're going to take a root of a numerator and denominator, basically split them up. We know what's the square root of 9. Square root of 9 is 3. And we know what's the square root of 16, which is 4. So we took the square root of numerator and denominator. It's that easy. All right, let's move on to square root of decimal number. So we can see here 2.25. We learned how to rewrite the decimal as a fraction. So therefore, it will be 225 over 100. Okay, so we learned before that when it's a fraction, we find the square root of the numerator and denominator. The first one is easy. 225 ends with 5, and there's what number multiplied by itself will end with 5, something with 5. So therefore, that will be 15 over 10. Now we can simplify this and rewrite it as a decimal, meaning 15 divided by 10 will equal 1.5. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Is 0.01. Again, we're going to write it as a fraction. It's 1 over 100 because there's 2 spaces over here. And we have to find the square root of each number, which will be 1 over 10. And how do we write 1 over 10? 0.1. Let's go ahead and evaluate expressions with square roots. 4 times square root of 64 plus 7. We're going to follow these 3 steps. First, identifying the radical, which means finding the square root of 64. That equals 8. And then the second step, we will multiply 8 by 4. So let's go ahead and do that. 8 times 4 equals 32. And finally, the last step, we will add 32 plus 7. The final answer is 39. Let's go ahead and write that. Let's evaluate expressions with square roots. Our equation is 4 times square root of 64 plus 7. Our first step is simplify the radical first. Let's rewrite our equation. 4 times square root of 64 plus 7, which will look like, what is the square root of 64? That equals 8. So let's rewrite it. 4 times 8 plus 7. Our second step is to multiply then add following the order of operation. 4 times 8 equals 32. And 32 plus 7 equals 39. So the value of expression is 39. There are some problems you can practice on your own and come back to find the answers. All right, welcome back. Again, we have an equation. We're not just looking square root of 36. This is an equation, and that means what number was squared to equal 36. So x will equal plus or minus 6. Let's start our second equation. That means square root x minus 3 raised to the second power and square root of 9. So this will be x minus 3 equals plus or minus 3 because square root of 9 equals 3. Now we split the equation. X minus 3 equals -3 and x minus 3 equals +3. Now we're going to add 3 to both sides. X here will equal 0, and here we're going to add again +3 plus 3, and x will equal 6. Square root of 3.24, we will rewrite it as a fraction, which will be square root of 324 over 100. Square root of 324 equals 18. And square root of 100 equals 10, which we can write as decimal, which is the same thing as saying 18 divided by 10, which will equal 1.8. Next problem, 5 times square root of 9 plus 8. Let's find the square root of 9. Square root of 9 equals 3. Let's go ahead and write that. Now we're going to be multiplying. That means 5 times 3 equals 15. And then we'll move on to adding 15 plus 8, which will equal 23. Let's go ahead and do a quick recap. Square roots are an undoing operation of squares. Every positive has 2 square roots, negative and positive. When you have a radical symbol like square root of 9, as we discussed before, it means we're looking for the principal root, and that is the positive root. When we're solving the equation, that's when we're looking negative and positive root. Same rules apply for fractions and decimals. In decimal, we're still looking for the square root of the numerator and denominator. To make it easy, we can convert the decimal into a fraction and then find the square root of the numerator and denominator. And when we have an expression, we will simplify the radicals first, then solve the equation, giving the order of operation. Pat on your back, you made it to the end. Great job. If this lesson helped you, go ahead and like this video. It really helps the channel. And if you want to keep building your math skills, check out my next video on estimating irrational square roots. Don't forget to subscribe to Teaching Math so you never miss a quick learning opportunity. And remember, learning math takes patience, practice, and perseverance. See you next time.